Yeah, we're live now. Please start.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kyle Ellicott. Welcome back to another edition of VCTV. Excited to have you today. Yesterday, if you weren't able to tune in, a quick recap. We talked about robotics, manufacturing, and overall what was happening in Industrial 4.0 or the Industry 4.0. This is the next wave of where the industries that we rely on and the infrastructure that we look at are shifting and shaping. A lot is happening in this space. It was once not necessarily something people paid much attention to unless you're in the industry. Now it's something core, something we need to be paying attention to and looking at as it affects so many parts of our lives. And as we talked about yesterday and Vadim brought to our attention, right now, all industries that can be automated will be automated in the next 5 years. Now, if you don't know what that means, again, we're going to dive in that today. Digitization has affected almost every industry, every market, every technology, and in every region around the world over the last 6 months. But it's something that's been worked on for the past decade, and going forward is going to play a bigger part of our lives and our businesses as well. Now, today's topic, we're going to continue. We're going to go a little deeper in Industry 4.0, and we're going to look at supply chains, logistics, and manufacturing as a whole. So we're coming down another level. Why is this important? Supply chains have dramatically changed. We talked about this with Gary and Vadim and a few others yesterday. We brought in Brad, another expert in the space, to talk further about why all of this has changed. What does it mean for the future of supply chain and logistics and our products, how they get made, how they get delivered to us, how we use them, or maybe we won't use them anymore. So there's a lot to talk about, a lot to look at. We've got data, we've got technology, and a lot more that's going to come into this discussion today. Before we get started, a big thank you to you, our audience, for tuning in here on VCTV. We really appreciate you tuning in. Give us a thumbs up if you like what you hear. Click the subscribe button at any time. We are live, so if you've got questions or comments, drop them in the chat. I'll do my best to ask them in real time. If not, we're all available 24/7 online, and we'd love to hear from you. If you are a founder, reach out. We'd love to have you on the show. We host Startup Leaders Club, and would love to have you on to share your insights and thoughts around business, whether they're good, bad, the ugly, all the lessons that we learned as founders when building and growing companies. If you're an investor, we'd love to have you on our show here on VCTV as we unpack our minds and share how we think as investors, how we choose our investments, and what we see happening on both macro and micro levels around technologies and industries. And one more big thing before we get started, a big shout out to Maria and to the entire LA Token team for bringing VCTV possible to your screen on any device, anywhere you may be in the world. Now, with that, let's go ahead and get kicked off. So first and foremost, I want to welcome back a dear friend, one of the best AI experts I've had the chance to meet in my day, and also a lover of everything data. Gary Fowler, welcome back to the show. A little intro and background on yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. It's great to see you again. So my name's Gary Fowler, and I've been doing companies for 15 different startups over 35 years. And I'm passionate about artificial intelligence. I was on the original management team of Click Software, an AI company that was sold to Salesforce for $1.35 billion in August. I am currently the CEO and president of GSD, Get Shit Done Venture Studios, and we help incredible AI companies go global. And there's so much data around us, and we're going to get into it a little bit later, around us, whether it's manufacturing, logistics, supply chain. We need to make sense of it, and we need to make sense of it quickly and make some decisions. So I'm really, really excited to be here. Thanks, Kyle.
Absolutely, and AI plays such a fundamental role in those decision-making processes. And I know you just did an article on GTP3, which is already starting to see teases of what we thought wouldn't be here for years to come. And so I would love to dive into that. And I'll make sure to share the articles I did yesterday with our audience as well. And Vadim, welcome back. It's been a whole 24 hours since I've seen both you and Gary, but it's an honor nonetheless to have you both here. The robotics expert, who may be a robot himself, we don't know, but we'll find out today. Vadim, welcome back. Little intro and background on yourself.
Thanks, Kyle. So basically, I've been investing for the past maybe 12 years before I did a startup of my own in Spain. These days, I'm mostly investing in deep tech with a very particular thesis. So I'm investing in the ecosystem of unmanned solutions. So basically, the solutions which comprised an end-to-end sort of connected, fully compatible ecosystem to disrupt certain industries. And by the way, logistics is definitely one of them.
Awesome. And we did talk a little bit about that yesterday. I found some more research on what's happening in the robotic space, by the way, just reading on a site this morning around how when it came to robotics, I believe it was in the 2013, 39% of all robotic installations were for automotive. Now, just in the past couple of years, auto is actually down less than 30% in terms of all installations. And we're starting to see more happening in the robotic space around industry. So back to our conversation yesterday and today, that robotic installations really have started to move into that industrial 4.0 sector we've talked so much about, including supply chain and manufacturing outside of automotive. So Vadim, your thesis is proven true, my friend, as we discussed. And with that being said, another good friend I want to welcome back, a genius in his areas of expertise. Paul, welcome back to the show. A little background and introduction on yourself as well.
Hi, Kyle. It's good to be with all of you again today from our last session. My background spans shipping, logistics, 20 years in Asia. I've also set up operations in India and managed businesses across 14 countries, from advanced supply chain management. And now I also mentor startups, tech startups in the AI and logistics industry as well.
Awesome, wonderful, and welcome back to the show. We're going to talk a lot about that. We had Keith on yesterday, who's based in Singapore as well, talking a little bit about what he was seeing from the government's level, but also the oil and gas perspective of where both things have been shifting and changing in the industry 4.0 era and how that is impacting the Asia region. So excited to dive deeper into that and also unpack some of that experience you have with startups. I think that's very fundamental to us as investors, but also as to founders that may be tuning in today. And last but not least, Brad, welcome to the show. First time guest here with me, but a little introduction, a little background.
Thanks, Kyle. I'm glad to be here. It's exciting. My name's Brad Cohen. I live in Boston, Massachusetts, and I have a background since basically fully in startups since I was in college. I started my first company and have started 19 companies since then, all dealing with big data, digital media. Started my first AI company in 1998 around a neural network algorithm that we licensed and built a company around. So I've had some successes, I've had some failures, and hopefully learn from those failures to make those successes better. But currently I have 3 companies. Two are in digital media. One's a large international digital media company based around the globe with 22 offices. We have a sports tech startup in digital media as well. And one of my main areas day to day is we have a digital health business called EdgeCase, which will be shifting to MedCase Health, which focuses on AI for medicine, AI assisted. So we handle all the data side. So taking data, normalizing it, making it so that AI can understand and do AI assisted work. But with that, we have physicians all over the globe that work for us that have been coming and asking for different medical supplies. So we've spun out, I have supply chain experience as well, spun out a group that deals solely on PPE. And so using our relationships around the globe, and we have factory direct relationships, and so we're dealing a hands-on day-to-day with the mess that's taking place between Asia and the US right now.
So Brad, let's start with you then. With that being said, I mean, what are you seeing kind of really happen in this space? So from a supply chain, I mean, you spun out a company and division to do this and focus on this area. You know, what was the lead to make that decision? And then also, what are you seeing kind of as the state of the industry, if you will, from a supply chain side as you're moving from this in the health sector?
It's a good and complex question because I'm not joking, it is a mess. And everybody's affected, obviously, around everybody around the world. So I'll give you my perspective, which is pretty narrow. We turned out and we had about 6 people on our team that were supply chain experts. And physicians from India to Africa, Latin America, all started calling saying, hey, we need PPE. Well, we looked and said, you know what, we can start delivering it. We have what we need, but we don't have a supply chain company. So in February, we spun this out. And since then, we've been delivering to about 7 countries around the globe regularly. And so what we're seeing, and including state governments and so on. So there's a massive gray market. Factory, the whole supply chain is upside down for medical supplies specifically, including other supplies, but specifically medical supplies and sanitary. So anybody that was in the traditional business of janitorial supply, medical supply, is having the same problems generally that everybody else has because there's just a finite amount of supply out there. So it's clearly a seller's market. Sellers are mostly calling shots. 2 months ago, everything was China. Now it's all shifting to other parts of Asia, mostly Malaysia, Thailand, and Vietnam. And with the constraints with shipping, constraints with air freight, it's causing prices to obviously jump. You see it in the marketplace, but on the wholesale side, it's, for instance, gloves pricing is changing about every 2 weeks right now. Just there's only a handful of factories in the world. There's only a finite amount of rubber. And so it's creating this backlog, and it makes it very difficult. And at the end of the day, the hospitals suffer, the government and the people. So what we try to do is focus on really trying to obviously bring good pricing, but there's too many middlemen. So everybody and their brother, it seems like, is a broker. And then that's causing confusion and causing a lot of issues in the marketplace.
Yeah, that's we've heard a few other things like that as well. And Paul, I want to come to you. I see you've already unmuted, but are you seeing something similar? And I mean, being based in Asia, but also doing a lot of work back here as well in the US, what are you seeing as well as kind of that current state of supply chains right now in your world?
First, I'd like to just touch on what Gary had mentioned and reconfirm what he just said. I'm actually working on an entrepreneurial deal with masks and gloves as well with different sourcing points. And what we're seeing is there are a lot of layers in this industry. So there are the middlemen to the middlemen. So instead of a straight line, a lot of this market currently, because of the PPE crisis, are going through layers, and then you have to test and make sure that they're valid products. And then getting airspace is almost impossible. Canada flew in their own planes to take millions of masks. They literally flew in their own planes to make sure they could air freight it. So even if you get the medical equipment sourced in Asia and it's the correct validity, you still have to look at the air freight options and pay a very high premium to get space. And ocean takes too long. So I think that's going to be a continuous problem until we get the vaccine, frankly. So I fully agree with what Gary was saying. That was my call in the last hour, actually. And then overall, we're seeing the supply chains, other factors. We're seeing a slowdown in ocean volume dramatically worldwide as consumer demand has gone down dramatically. So the ocean carriers are really getting hit heavily with capacity. The port volume is down. Out my window in Singapore, I actually have a view of the port, which is the second largest port in the world. And you can see the volume is significantly down worldwide. So we're seeing a heavy surge of air freight, but that's with limited flying capacity. And then we're seeing beyond the medical equipment, we're seeing everything else is getting squeezed, waiting for the consumer market to come back. And it's touching hubbing, it's touching the normal shipping patterns, and it's even touching the lead time strategy on different products.
And Gary, Vadim, I want to come to you on that same part just to kind of set the stage as we move forward into more of this discussion. But Vadim, what are you seeing around supply chains? I mean, you're very focused on robotics right now. We talked a little bit about this idea yesterday that so much of this was going to get digitized and pushed forward. But from your perspective and some of those things that you're seeing, where is kind of the current state of supply chain in terms of your world right now?
That's a tough one, to be honest, because I'm not directly involved in the in the supply chain per se. But what I see in some of the portfolio companies, both my own and of a couple of entities I advise. So, for example, when we're talking about automotive manufacturers, that these guys have to pre-order some of the components basically 6 months in advance. So for them, nothing has changed except for the fact that they still have to ship it basically with the same regularity. Any delay is basically deadly for them. And in some cases, when there is no sea freight available, which is the usual way to go, they actually ship it via air freight, which basically kills all of the margins, but keeps the business running, right? So this is just basically one case. In terms of how much it's getting digitized, there are a lot of software solutions in terms of, automation of the supply chain. I see a lot of, so if we split the entire supply chain into different segments, a lot is digitized in terms of the manufacturing part of it, right? So when I say digitized, it means automated, and you have robotic arms, and you have like fully automated process. There are things which are semi-automated in terms of long distance shipping, which there are still issues to be solved. And basically in terms of last mile, there are a lot of intents to automate, the sort of intercity and last mile delivery. But at the moment, this stays intense. And this is precisely what we'll be trying to change and to put into a fully autonomous mode.
And Gary, to you, same question, but I mean, even from an AI perspective, I mean, I'm sure you're starting to see some shifts and change. I know we are here in the Bay Area, but just on a perspective of the US and my relationships in Asia, things are dramatically different than they used to be, to Paul and Brad's points. Are you seeing anything else, or is anything from where you are right now, are you seeing anything in Latin America to Europe to South America as well that might be changing?
I mean, the thing is, I'm not directly seeing it. I hear about it, but I can tell you that there's a phenomenal, huge problem. Think about the logistics. So we just talked about a few of them. Paul alluded to some in terms of the ships, in terms of air freight, but think of the problem. So let's just say it's oil delivery, and I've got 1,000 trucks. Now I have bronze, I've got gold, and I've got platinum level of service, and I've got trucks located everywhere with different capacities. Then I've got oil that's coming over on a ship, right? So how in the world, if I order my oil, do you know which level of service do I have, where my trucks are located, what depot that it's located at? And more importantly, that's the easier part of the question. The other part of it is, how can I forecast when I can get that oil delivered using artificial intelligence? So if we look all the way back through this supply chain to the point it comes out of the ground and then gets loaded into barrels to a ship, we need to have a much more efficient way. And we talk about digitalization. By the way, Click Software, the company that I was on the original management team of, actually solved some of these problems and still evolving the technology. Now it's part of Salesforce, but it's, how do I take care of all these issues? I've got X size truck, I've got this much oil, it's located in this dock, it's located in this depot. How do I get it out to the customer? And how do I calculate that from the point of getting it in the barrel and on the ship over the point that it's the end? And these kind of things, exactly what Paul was saying in terms of it's too Vadim, it's too expensive to ship by air. So we need to do a much better job to really optimize this service chain optimization, to optimize the systems that we got out there. And companies that can really crack it, not only optimize, but actually use AI to forecast, are going to be incredible. And I mean, think about all the data that you have to have from your GPS or Glassnode system in addition to that, right? They all got to be tied together. It's almost like you got your assistant for optimization for logistics.
Absolutely. Paul, I see you've unmuted. Do you want to continue the comment there?
Yeah, I think the great example with the supply chain of oil is that we had a minus $38 a barrel price for oil for 3 or 4 days. So the entire supply chain across the world, refineries, ships, trucking, everything backstopped. And we had a minus $38 a barrel delivery price a few months ago. Could we have ever imagined that? So, I mean, that's a great example that was mentioned. One of my former companies, which has really been cutting edge, is the Li & Fung Group. And they've been the largest virtual manufacturer in the world with over 18,000 virtual factories in 55 countries, $22 billion of revenue, covering several $100 billion of Fortune 500 clients. And they literally, after all these years of being a cutting edge virtual manufacturing and sourcing company, they have now had to completely re-innovate the entire company, restructure it to move to digitization. And they're investing hundreds of millions of dollars. And they've actually taken the company public listed on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, and they privatized it in order to restructure the whole company to rebuild a cutting edge advantage with digitization. Now, they're the first company to create global virtual manufacturing on a massive scale. Foxconn replicated that model for electronic goods, but even a company like Li & Fung has had to now buy time to redesign completely the digitization strategy. They're doing some very cool things, but it takes several years as they relaunch. And then simultaneously, we're seeing some production will stay in China. Some has already moved very fast into Vietnam and India and Indonesia and Thailand. So we're seeing that pivot of manufacturing already taking place. And then we're seeing different distribution channel networks evolving in the ASEAN region, in India, in Africa. So instead of big, large retailers distributing products as they do in America and Europe, we're now seeing a whole nother model where you're going to have small and mid-sized micro distributors and retailers online feeding products in parts of the developing world. So the need for digitization, and as I said to you last time, it's not really supply and demand chain anymore. It's a dynamic value networks. And we're now managing planning networks, processing networks, fixed and virtual manufacturing, fixed and virtual logistics assets. You may own and control them. You may take marginal space, but as long as you have the visibility across the whole platform, you can manage it optimally. So I think we're just in the start of a complete transformation of the industry, and this virus is just propelling the speed and the China-US trade friction. The speed of this momentum is going to go even faster than we all anticipated.
And I think you've called it. I mean, this is all completely being redone, right? We've seen this with many industries. Brad mentioned around healthcare. He's taken big strides in that space as well. But just from an overall standpoint, whether it be hyper local logistics or micro distributors, as you mentioned, this is all what's going to be at play, and not now, but going forward in the future, as all of these what were called emerging markets are now becoming new and improved markets. They're establishing, or they're becoming established markets, which is exciting to see. Brad, I see you've unmuted. Do you want to continue that point?
Well, I do, because I think everybody's bringing up really valid points. I think the discussion has to split into two. One is that there's a short term and then there's a long term. A lot of what we're talking about, I completely agree, automation and employing a lot of analytics using AI and other tools to predict. But there's another opportunity, which is the short term. And short term in everyone's world is different. Is it a month? Is it 2 years? For me, it feels like short term is like 2 years. So if I look out 2 years and you look at what COVID-19 is doing to all of us, and you see that the short-term logistic problems are not just, the medicine and the PPE are on the front line, because those are by far the highest demand in its lives. But then you look at all the other components that come about because of lockdowns and completely shutting down supply chains. So I'll just give you a quick example. We sell these oximeters, which are little oxygen pulse oximeters you put on your finger. They're inexpensive. Obviously, the price jumps way up when there's demand. But one thing I really found interesting was when Italy was locked down, the supply chain for all the components inside those devices went away. The whole production died off. Most of those are produced in China. And not only did you have air bridge gap between U.S. and Europe as well, and bringing planes in from Canada, U.S. was bringing the Air Force in, and so on. To solve that, you didn't even have the supplies to actually make the raw product. And then on top of it, you didn't have the labor because of the way that the timing that hit with the Lunar New Year and so on. So where I'm going is that all of these short-term problems this is our 9/11 of medical security and medical health. This is such a transformative time that it's going to create some incredible opportunities. Hopefully, it'll also help save lives and make people healthier, and be able to use this to really optimize this essentially outdated system since the turn of the century, which is, if you add airplanes in, so for the last 175 years or so. So it's an old system, and this discussion is great because using Industry 4.0 and so on, this is going to force all this massive change to then bring on the longer term change in the future.
Absolutely, Gary.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is the digital transformation again we talk about, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's where we are. We got to be more efficient. We got to be more effective, and we got to use tools that we've got at our disposal, like artificial intelligence, to be able to drive it. I mean, we need to do it. And so, I mean, in a way, this is a good thing because it's forcing us to, as Brad said, it's forcing us to change our behavior and implement that technology.
And so since we're here on sorry, go ahead, Vadim.
Well, basically, just a short side note. For autonomous logistics industry, for unmanned logistics, COVID has been, sorry to say this, a great driver. So companies which before were like, oh, you know what, so many security issues and whatnot, now are weighing in, the balance of something may crash versus how many people might get infected. And all of a sudden, a few companies has gotten lots of very instant orders and urgent orders on, hey, we really need regular delivery between cities, regular delivery between regions in a purely unmanned way. So we've seen a spike of orders over the past maybe couple of months.
Yeah, and I don't expect that to change. I don't think any of us do, right? That goes back to the micro distributors or the hyper local logistics, where these things that were once very not necessarily centralized or distributed, I don't want to use those words, but they were very regionally based, I think is probably the best way to put it, have now come down and if anything expanded and shrunken down to hyper local areas, but then expanded their reach, right? So logistics, minimizing those times to get things to places, but then also maximizing the amount of places they go. As well. I think that's a huge change that won't go away. I mean, Paul, when you were last on the show, we talked about how real estate was looking at being refactored or re-outfitted to be hyper local distribution centers, where some of these, former retail outlets or real estate that we saw actually was getting scooped up and being used as warehouses to distribute products, or that 3D printing, which has been talked about for years, is finally starting to come into reality from an industry level, where things will be 3D printed and sent out right from a small little store in a small city, small town, or a big city, big town, versus having to come from one regionally focused location or another, which is exciting.
I was just going to say, like in Singapore, we're actually looking at 3D manufacturing, not only for the local market, but to feed parts of Indonesia, parts of Malaysia, parts of Thailand and Vietnam, as long as you can print and deliver within a day, 2 days. So you're going to see those hub strategies in major US cities and European cities, but we're actually looking at feeding several other countries with a 3D printing strategy. And 15 years ago, I was running the largest ASRS facility in Singapore, and we worked with the Singapore government, and they actually put 4 customs officers on site. We integrated IT, and we could custom clear cargo in 15.4 seconds. This is 15 years ago. In 15.4 seconds, and we could change the individual slots of a 44,000 pallet ASRS from bonded to non-bonded with 10 minutes notice, right? Which was the first time it had been done. Now that was 15 years ago. Today, we're having drones flying through the warehouses around the world doing inventory stock takes. We're having Swisslog and others deploying robots. And as you know, we're gonna have 50,000 dark warehouses, which are completely robotic in the next 4 to 5 years alone. So the speed of these changes. And then the other thing we haven't talked about is how we're literally going to be linking blockchain and even cryptocurrencies into this dynamic value equation. So we're experimenting, but like in China, you can borrow money with Ant Financial, which is owned by Alibaba, and you're paying with Alipay. And when you go to the stores, you use your phone. You don't use money, you don't use credit cards, you use your phone. And in some cities, you can already use your face to pay for your groceries, right? In Shenzhen and a few other experimental cities. So these trends are coming very fast. And I think they're going to integrate in terms of digitization, virtualization, the cryptocurrency, and then really the AI. I'm involved with a Hong Kong company right now, and AI is being used for planning purposes with Apple, with Walmart and others. They're really breaking out. But now there are startups in the US and Asia which are building AI solutions to help mid-sized companies do their planning, plan their solutions. So I think that's another very quick wave that's coming, is cost-effective AI solutions for mid-sized companies so that they can compete in this environment.
Absolutely. And before we get to robotics, because Vadim, I'm coming to you. I see you've got a point that you want to get to, but let's open up the blockchain and digital currency space. I mean, a lot of things have shifted and changed very dramatically in the past week in those spaces, and not just what happened here in the United States and the SEC yesterday, and the idea that banks can now become custodies, but we also saw Volvo making big investments. Mercedes has started making investments. Also in the augmented space, we've seen a lot happening, and not just here's a check. I mean, we're actually seeing deployments coming out of some of these companies into different either business units internally or products that they sell. So from your perspective, what's happening in blockchain as it applies to this new, really this world we're living, excuse me, not new, but the world we're living around supply chain and logistics? And Paul, I want to start with you, and then Vadim, I'm coming to you on robotics. Gary, you know what I'm coming to you on here in just a moment, and then Brad as well. So Paul.
I think, just skimming really quickly, we started with the Bitcoin type of blockchain where you have the miners unlocking the value and rewarding them. And of course, that's a big energy consumer as well. And so there's the real and the non-survivable digital tokens coming up. But now we've evolved into different models where we're using more complex digital platforms for the blockchain that don't require the miners, but that are still shared data flows across many players. And then you have companies like IBM. I spent half a day at the regional headquarters here, and their goal is to be the neutral arbiter for major Fortune 500 companies. So they have 12 initiatives, Walmart and Nestle in one space, major banks in another, retail. They're building silos, and they're working with Maersk Line for shipping, which will become an open system for other shipping lines. And they're basically saying, we're going to create a blockchain on our database worldwide, our cloud controlled internal structure. We will be the neutral referee, and then we'll build the blockchain together by industry vertical, and then you'll all leverage it, but we will be a neutral arbiter. So I think, without going into too much detail, we're starting to see schisms of 3-4 different types of models of blockchain. Do you have a closed blockchain with a neutral arbiter like an IBM? Do you have the old miner networks? Or do you have other advanced layers where multiple entities play, but with more advanced technology that eliminates the miner role? You guys are, some on this panel are much more the experts than I am in that space. But I really think we're getting multiple types of blockchain solutions in play right now. And part of it will tie into government regulations also.
Well, and I'll just add before we get to Vadim here, so 2 big projects were announced, and by projects, let me correct myself. 2 big initiatives that are live and active were just released publicly that hadn't really been talked about, and that was Project Ubin, what's happening in Singapore right now. So JP Morgan, the Singaporean government, and Tesemec, which I may be pronouncing it correctly, so apologies, but just rolled out their entire brand new commercial ready payments network, which has been in development for 5 years not like let's pilot, no, 5 years, this is commercially ready, that will be rolled out and deployed, multi-currency payments network that's going to tie into all different areas of industry, including the port. There's 100 plus page, I'll be generous, 100 plus page report detailing all of this as it's rolling out commercially. And then China drops the same day almost 145 page blueprint on how the country is rolling out as a blockchain hub with over 12 projects that are already in piloting with results in these key areas. And I think Paul is pointing to me. Obviously, I have a lot of knowledge. I'm very passionate, so I'll slow it down. But to Paul's point, there's a lot happening in actuality, and there's many companies all over the world, not just in Asia, that are doing this aggressively. You can look to Australia. We've talked about Africa. We talked about what's happening in Latin America. Here in the States, there's a ton. But let's pause there on blockchain, or else, we'll go for 2 hours and I'll just ramble until Paul stops me. But Vadim, to you, robotics. Where are robotics playing a role in this whole piece that we're looking at? I just got an article alerted to me from TechCrunch about Amazon sending Scout robots to deliver groceries in Georgia and Tennessee, here in the Bay Area. I was out on one afternoon walk to stretch my legs, and I saw a little robot pass me delivering food. From a logistics standpoint, I think it's obvious, but what else are people maybe not seeing where robots are playing a big impactful role? I mean, here on VCTV, we want to show those types of things.
Well, actually, I'm I would say I'm most passionate about the last mile delivery. And I think it still has a long way to go till it becomes something really usable. You are absolutely right. There are pilot projects by Amazon, by UPS, by DHL, by a number of players in China, whereas the last mile delivery is being enabled by robots. But those remain sort of test stage pilots at the moment. It will take quite some time before they convert to a full scale and to the full reality. And you would see basically not just one drone flying as you walk the street, but basically 100 drones or 500 drones as you walk a 5-minute distance. So, but this is one piece of the puzzle. The second part is intercity or inter-hub delivery with autonomous vehicles. And these, so a couple of companies I know are now participating in, I would say, extensive pilots, basically where they're delivering boxes of goods, relatively heavy. We'll be talking about probably anywhere between 300 and 500 kilograms between two cities. So to a logistics center from which now, unfortunately, it's not being delivered throughout the last mile by the drones. Hopefully that will occur soon enough. But these days they're being delivered in a traditional way in the last mile. But so there is intercity logistics, which is part of it. There are a lot of plans in terms of automation of ocean, basically, or water-based logistics. So we'll be soon seeing at least a few autonomous vehicles on water delivering goods. Well, I mean, if you look at it in a different way, there have been, I think, recently news where I think Latin American drug cartel has developed an unmanned submarine to try and develop and deliver drugs over a long distance. So basically, the innovation goes even these ways, even though that's not something we should support or endorse. But I mean, kudos for the for a novel solution there. So
creativity,
yeah, exactly. So basically what I'd say is within the course of the next 5 years, we would see at the very least several fully automated logistical solutions from the central shipping base, from the central logistical base to local hubs and to the end customers. So fully autonomous without a single man involved in any part of this process. This is my forecast. So, and I think the most exciting part is precisely the complete automation of the value chain.
And Brad, to you, before we get to Gary on the AI side, because I think AI ties us all really well together. From the digital health perspective, where you're focusing a lot, including supply chain, where are some of those areas of opportunity that investors may not be seeing right now that they could be paying attention to as kind of trends in this next wave, short term and potentially long term? So minus
Sure.
2 years, plus 2 years.
I don't want to take anything away from Gary on the AI portion, but I'll talk on it a little bit because that's our primary business with our company. So, there's a big crossover on the digital health side of AI, especially with COVID. COVID's going to be the biggest changer in digital health, I think, in history, because it's just forcing such a short period of time all the from a remote. So if you add in 5G and you look at high-speed internet access and internet access that's becoming available around the world, with the growth of telemedicine, and then you add in a layer of machine learning AI into it, to be able to basically, our goal is to be able to deliver health to people anywhere in the world. That's the ultimate goal, where underserved can get the same quality health that you could get here, health care that you can get here. Not necessarily a surgeon, not necessarily a lot of the physical components, although that will come through robotics and other key areas, but to be able to at least be able to have access to the physicians. And that should be democratized, because people shouldn't be able to, only if you're in Tanzania, you might only have a few hundred doctors in the whole country. In Boston, we have a few hundred doctors in one hospital in one shift. So where AI plays a role in medicine, the automation component, because all this essentially comes down to some form of automation, that using AI, using the ability to use remote sensing, to be able to access patients direct, like we're doing on this call, and you can actually have some really amazing tech that's already being deployed, where you can take a remote reading of a chest. You can take all the sensing of all the different components for a normal session that you would have when you go in, and it's all done now. It's mostly automated. So I see that you'll be using blockchain, your information will be anonymous, so that you'll be HIPAA compliant, so everything stays private. Anything that's shared, any of that data gets de-identified and remains anonymous, so you don't risk your personal information going out. So if you have a chest X-ray that's using your chest X-ray from a hospital, and they shared your information for training an AI model, all that information that stays private, and that then basically creates this worldwide ability to increase the diagnosis and reduce false positives and errors by doctors.
Absolutely, and to that, I mean, that's a perfect lead into Gary. Gary, where are these areas of opportunity that investors should be paying attention to in AI, leading off what Paul, Vadim, and Brad have already added to the conversation?
I mean, think about it. So we've got this beautiful supply chain, but we need to be better at, for instance, Canon, to be able to look at defects. And so using computer vision to be able to look at defects in product or services, to be able to do design, to be able to design faster so we can get a product to the market knees on. So being able to forecast more accurately what the demand is going to be. So using artificial intelligence, as I've said before, AI is the new electricity, and having that technology that can tie it together, I mean, that's really the backbone of it. So having that assistant, and also having it so that it can also at a point in an unsupervised way start to make some decisions, right? The very least collaborate with us, at the most be able to make the decisions. So we're in that environment. What I hear is that the efficiencies of the supply chain need to dramatically increase, and we also be a lot more effective. AI allows you to be able to do that.
Absolutely. And gentlemen, we're in that top of the hour. I want to get to the lightning round with one or two more questions before we get to closing thoughts. Paul, I want to come to you. I mean, we've talked a lot about these different areas and how technologies are integrating, but one thing that we do like to talk about here on VCTV is advice to our startups, to the founders out there that are building in these spaces, what they should or shouldn't be paying attention to, and thoughts. And I know you work with a lot of startups and accelerators, not just locally in Asia, but also globally. What advice do you have for those companies that are and founders who are building in this space, preparing for, as Brad said, that long-term horizon, as a lot is happening, a lot is changing? What advice do you want to give to those founders out there?
I've been involved with 2 IPOs in Hong Kong and the Bombay Stock Exchange. And one issue is your messaging. You have to have a very powerful, clear message about what you're building, why it's unique, and defining scalability targets that are measurable and believable. And that's how you convince investors to come aboard. Now, we're in a space where we're having thousands of what I call razor blades who are targeting niche opportunities within the supply chain, within the industry spaces, and they're finding their specialty niche and they're attacking it, and they really need to focus on that core expertise. The investor community will know when they're in a unique space, and then it's really about how they build their case studies to prove the technology is real, that it has value, and then scale up. And a lot of these companies will raise a little bit of capital and they'll expand too quickly, a little bit of the ego game, and then they will dilute too quickly. And then when they start to scale with real value, they actually have the burden of too much cost, and they may not survive. Just when they're in the B2C round, when they're really ready to unlock the value, the owner is down to a fraction of equity, unmotivated and locked in, and the capital investments are too heavy. So I think companies really need to focus on case studies, refining the technology niche and not going too wide to really show their specialization as a razor blade disrupting. And they need to manage their costs in an effective way and scale intelligently, narrow and aggressive rather than too wide where they can lose control just as the company really unlocks its potential value and breakout.
Gary, I see you've already, and absolutely, Gary.
Yeah, I mean, so, again, I call it, keep it simple, stupid. So when you're building your product, make sure you go out to potential customers and test, validate it. Do they really want to buy it? Are they really willing to put money out? And as co-founders of the company, that's your job. Get out to see if people want it. Because what happens a lot of times, they're technical co-founders and they have great ideas, but they overbuild it. They spend a lot of money and they never really get it to market because they're always iterating. What you want to do is, it's good to iterate, but make sure that's what the customer wants to buy. Door number 1. Door number 2 is, if you're building a team, make sure that you've got a marketing person, a technical person, and possibly an operations person. Rule of 3s, I wouldn't go beyond 3 because investors don't want to invest in larger companies. At the same time, you want to make sure today it's critically important. Do you have any revenue at all? When are you forecasting revenue? It surely makes VCs feel a whole lot better. And the other thing is, what's your vision? As Paul said, what's your vision of the future? So are you painting the vision? Make sure you have those business use cases that make sense. Make sure that the market's growing. And if you stay too narrow, it's going to kill you. If you're on artificial intelligence, they can be applied in all kinds of different ways. Look where those uses could be and focus on that. The other thing is, I hear a lot of times, not you, Kyle, not the team members here, but sometimes the glass is half empty. I mean, if you don't believe you can do it, you shouldn't be doing a startup. If you don't believe the glass is half full, why in the world would you try to do a startup? You got to motivate your team, you got to motivate investors, and you got to motivate customers. So get out and get shit done.
Absolutely. And Vadim, same to you. I mean, building in the robotic space right now is capital intensive. There's a lot happening. It's finally here, as we talked a little bit about yesterday. But what advice do you have for founders that are getting into this space or really starting to grow and scale as the demand has increased?
So actually, a couple of things. First, I'd love to address the logistics startups part. I mean, over the past maybe precisely 12 years, I've seen several really good companies in the logistics space, and each of them has done tremendously. One was acquired by Amazon, another was acquired by a large Russian corporation. So lots of good cases. And I think logistics industry will always be up for disruption from now till the end of time. Something done more efficiently, faster, cheaper, higher quality and whatnot. So this is the first point. The second point, which I would say is the critical one. Unlike other industries, logistics is very real. I mean, you're doing social media startup and whatnot, you can create a lot of hype and say, well, you know what, we'll monetize it sometimes later, and you sell a dream. Logistics industry, you must have a dream, but you need to sell numbers. Because your customers, the people who are going to buy it, they're not going to buy a dream that within the next 12 years, you're going to have everything perfect. They need to say, okay, so how much cheaper, how much faster is this going to happen for me if I use your technology? So this is a very real and down-to-earth industry. Focus on the numbers. And the third, precisely when it comes to combining logistics and technology and robotics, just today in the morning, I had a call with one startup, and they were trying to sell a dream. They said, well, you know what? I'm not very free to discuss like what exactly, like this is going to happen like this, and all of this is going to be automated. And we're just doing our seed round and whatnot. And I said, like, guys, that's really nice, but did you calculate all of this? Did you factor all of this in? Because you're saying a year down the road, you're going to be up and running. What are your costs going to be? How about all of these hurdles which you'll need to overcome, these technological issues? These are major things. So robotics and logistics, really one needs to only get into the intersection of these two industries if he is expert in at least one of them. An expert, we're talking like big way, big time.
Absolutely. And Brad, to you to finish us out here before closing thoughts, those that are looking to get into the digital health space and leverage the power of data and all that we've talked about today, what advice do you have? Maybe one or two quick pieces of advice to those looking to get started, or again, survive as the scale and demand has really hit in ways that never were expected?
Well, I think that at any time, it's always important to look back, learn from the past, and apply it towards the future. In the past, everything's been, take it slow or plan. I think you still have to do that. But I think that the time continuum has now shrunk. Everything is faster than it used to be. Everyone's used to working. Everyone's working for the most part. It seems, at least people that 24/7. They're exhausted, but everyone's used to this faster pace. So the whole workforce, the whole way everyone's working remotely is dramatically going to change. It's going to affect all of our industries. It already has in a short period of time. So the old adage of you need to have a team in one place. Well, we may not be working together like we used to. We're already not. How long is that going to be? Is that another year or 2 years? So taking some of the old investor kind of rules that a lot of these guys would want you to think, I have a team here and everything has to be the way it used to be. Those rules are being rewritten as we go every day. So don't be afraid to rewrite the rules. Don't be afraid to look at what we have today, apply the past, and take it to the future. Because I forgot who said it, but everything, all the companies, everyone, the rules are constantly being rewritten to adapt to the current situation. The way we work is totally different. That transcends down into health, to logistics, to every aspect of this. So the short piece is don't be afraid to innovate. Of all the times in the world, at least in my life, which isn't hopefully that long, it's been 30 years in business, this is the most interesting and most dynamic I've ever seen. And I hope this is the peak, because this is a mess. But with mess comes, and with chaos comes order. So I think this will allow us to do a realignment and to be more orderly, and to be able to take all these amazing technologies and all these amazing guys on this call and all these smart people that are sitting at home thinking and applying it towards business moving forward. Need to come.
Absolutely. And with that, I want to come to closing thoughts as we're at the top of the hour, and want to make sure everyone can get to their meetings, or poor Paul can get to sleep as it's late on his side as well. So Brad, let's start with you. Any quick closing thoughts, and then where can everyone find you? So URL, et cetera, online. And again, we'll drop all the links in the show notes afterwards. But Brad, kick us off, closing thoughts, and then where can everyone find you?
I don't have a lot more to say because I already said it. But you can go to Ingress Ventures, which is ingress.ventures, and it's Brad at Ingress Ventures is my email. Feel free to reach out anytime. And I just wish everybody stay safe, healthy, and stay sane. And take care.
Wonderful. Vadim, to you.
So you can find me at aas.fund or on my LinkedIn profile, or feel free to reach out through my sort of personal email, vadim.tarsov@gmail.com. And basically, in terms of doing a startup in logistics, especially if you're automating it, by all means, come and talk to me.
Wonderful. Gary.
Thanks, Kyle. So Gary Fowler, Fowler. You can find me on LinkedIn, Gary at GSDVS.com, Get Shit Done Venture Studios. So if you got an incredible AI company and you want to go global and change the world, let us know. We've had $1 billion exit. We've raised hundreds of millions of dollars, and we just love to hear from you. Thanks, Kyle.
I love it. Thank you, sir. And Paul, last but not least, close us out. Closing thoughts. Where can everyone find you?
You can reach me on Paul Bradley at LinkedIn Singapore and my website, capricainternational.com. I just think we're at a point where disruption is the norm. There is no more order. And so you have to thrive on the opportunity of new ideas, new technologies, but scaling is the key to survival and success. And so there hasn't been a more exciting time to be an entrepreneur in history. And the AI robotics is really going to redefine every touch point of every business that we can conceive of in the future. So great time for entrepreneurs, and appreciate the time to discuss this with everyone.
Absolutely. And thank you so much, everyone. Really appreciate your time today, and couldn't have been better said, Paul, to send us out. And to you, our audience, thank you again for tuning in. If you like what you heard today, thank you, Gary. Give us a thumbs up, click the subscribe button. Please do reach out. If you're a founder, we'd love to talk to you. Also give you the chance to pitch all of us as investors. Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Gary. And if you're an investor, we'd love to have you on the show. Unpack your mind, talk a little bit, and share your insights of what you're seeing, what you're investing in, the trends, and the advice you'd like to pass on to the rest of the world as well. Thank you, Paul. And a big shout out to Maria, to the entire LA Token team for making VCTV possible. We'll be back here tomorrow with another episode talking not just about what we talked about today and all this week, but what's happening globally and in some cases macro or micro levels, regions around the world at investments as a whole, all across all different types of industries, technologies, and platforms as well. I'm Kyle Ellicott. You can reach me on all social medias. If you want to talk blockchain, like I've already rambled about, you want to talk investment, you want to talk about decentralized applications or anything else, reach out. Love to hear from you. I'm Kyle Ellicott, your host. See you back here tomorrow on VC.